Congratulations for logging in and joining on today. We're excited to be here for our 2021 outlook for economic outlook for the manufacturing community. I'm pleased to be here. I'm Todd Bingham with the Utah Manufacturers Association. Just so you know, it is me. I am here under the mask. And Tulinda Larsen with me here today with UAMMI, and we're excited to have her here as an economist and talk about what's happening in manufacturing. So throughout the webinar, we're utilizing the chat feature. So if you have questions, things you want to ask us, we'll try and make this as interactive as possible. Tulinda, if you're okay with that, and we'll do our presentation. And as we see those chat questions come up, we'll answer those and try and be informative for our folks. So after Tulinda does her piece on the economic side, I'll talk a little bit on my side on what we're seeing in the manufacturing community and some of the challenges that we've seen through the pandemic. So my pleasure to have you here. Good to see you again. And yes. Let's dive in and take it away.
Thank you so much, Todd. I really appreciate it. And thank you to the Utah Manufacturers Association for this fabulous facility for us in the manufacturing industry to do these podcasts, to get the information out, get the word out. I was very visionary of your team and really appreciate the opportunity. So under the CARES funding, first of all, there's the Utah Industry Resource Alliance, and both of our organizations are in it, along with several other organizations, including the Utah University of Utah MEP, Utah State, Impact Utah, World Trade Association, World Trade Center, and also Inland Port. So it's been great that we were able to all get together and pull together and represent manufacturing in the state of Utah. And as you know, we were able to secure some CARES funding back in the summertime, and we've put together 17 programs under UARA that are helping our manufacturers to weather this incredible storm that we're in. And one of the programs is to put together this forecast to help give some goalposts that manufacturers can look at to understand where their business is relative to the macroeconomic environment that we're all seeing, and for specifically the products that are offered by our manufacturers. So I'm not sure how we're doing the presentation. Okay. Is there a chance we could start with the first slide there, or are you mirroring? Technology, huh?
Right?
Todd?
Yeah,
Technology.
you know, I mean, I used to have a hard time getting a PowerPoint presentation to work in front of a group, and now we're running 3 computers and a Zoom and podcast. So yeah,
exactly.
it's outgrown my capabilities, but we're still working on it.
Exactly. Well, the biggest news is many of you have seen this presentation, these couple of slides we're going to go through, but they are still based on second quarter data because we're just gathering in, and the next report will come out in March, and that will have our fourth quarter data, which will be very enlightening. But I think we're still seeing some of these same trends that we saw over the summer. Should we give up on the presentation? And okay. But I'm blind. I can't. Well, what am I changing it on that? Oh, okay.
Change it on that
There we
screen
go.
right there.
Oh, perfect. Okay, I think we got it. Okay. So as I said, the Utah Industry Resource Alliance is all of our best friends, BFFs here in Utah, that are focused on the manufacturing community to elevate manufacturing, all types of manufacturing in Utah. I think you have all at some point seen this slide from the Kem Gardner report to the Governor's Office of Economic Development that really focuses on manufacturing as one of Utah's largest and leading industries. And I can't read it from this far, but you probably know some of the numbers by heart. I know that we employ
close to 150,000 people in the industry.
Fantastic.
You know, and that really doesn't even include, Tulinda, to your point. It includes some of the multiplier effect, but there's certainly areas of that multiplier effect that aren't included in that and reaches way beyond that, which is significant. Yeah.
And you know, we are a significant part of the GDP, domestic product for Utah, where we're 11% of the total GDP, the third largest source of GDP for Utah. And our earnings are above average. I mean, these are good jobs. So if you're out there and you are looking for a job, you want to make a career change, think about manufacturing, because
Yeah.
our
Yeah, I think
average earning is 72,000.
it is. And one of the things I don't think the public necessarily understands, that's 38% higher than the average wage in the state of Utah. That wage is second in manufacturing, is second only to the mining industry in the state of Utah
Wow.
in terms of average. And so, as you said, those are living wage jobs. Those are jobs that help individuals in communities purchase homes and be involved in those types of things. And so it truly is very significant when you talk wage.
It is. And again, in these times when there are so many workers in our economy that are displaced, um, our Department of Workforce Services have that great hot jobs website where you can go to and find what jobs are out there. So there are lots of opportunities for the manufacturing industry, and we're supporting, as we say, 47, almost 430,000 jobs. We've got significant earnings. And so, long story short, manufacturing is good for Utah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And our top manufacturers, it is somewhat of a consolidated industry, because our top industry, our top types of manufacturers account for 57%. And in that top, you'll see that we have our aerospace manufacturers, our petroleum manufacturers, and some of our very big companies. And many of them are really just small companies. But this is something, Todd, you and I have talked about a lot. When we look at forecasting the demand for the manufactured products for Utah's companies, we really have a dichotomy. We're still living in this dichotomy where some companies are in the fire pit. They can't make product fast enough.
Yeah.
And then there are others that are in the deep freeze. We don't have a lot in between.
Very true. It's interesting. The conversations that I've had with a lot of people, and this is true. I was on the phone or on a conference call this morning with my colleagues from around the Midwest who run manufacturers associations, and it's true there. There are a lot of companies that have done very well during the pandemic, and there are companies who have kind of battened down the hatches a little bit, or are riding out certain areas. Petroleum products is certainly one of those areas. Mining is another one that's down a little bit. But when folks ask me how's manufacturing doing, the answer generally is it depends. It depends. In some cases, industry specific, as you've alluded to here, and in some cases, almost company specific.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, the needs on both sides are different. So the needs for the ones that are seeing excessive demand for them are trying to figure out how to manage their business, how to get the production out the line. And workforce is a huge issue for them.
Yeah, I think the one thing that we can definitely agree on, and this is nationwide again as well, is that regardless of the pandemic, regardless of the company's current situation or trending back towards positive, whether they had an amazing year last year or whether they were down a little bit, talent acquisition and talent retention continues to be a critical part of where we go. I've often said that, one of the ways that we've dealt with talent acquisition and talent retention over the years has been kind of cannibalistic approach, that we find the individuals within other companies that have been trained, and then they kind of get stolen and pilfered back and forth. We all know that's not a long-term solution to our challenges for talent acquisition. I heard today, I think Utah's unemployment rate is 3.6
Yeah,
now, and even given everything we've been through in the last 12 months. So talent and workforce will continue to be one of our inhibiting factors in how we grow those products that are made here in Utah.
And how do we help the ones that are in the deep freeze? What can we do to help them?
Yeah, I think, I wish I had the simple answer for that.
Yeah.
I think one of the challenges, again, when you have a change in administration, and I talk federally, because our change in administration here in Utah with Governor Cox he's very supportive of business, very supportive of manufacturing, and a great colleague and friend of ours of industry. When you talk about that from a federal level, aside from the executive orders that were signed, 17 executive orders yesterday, which included some impacts to manufacturing nationally, no question. We don't know exactly where President Biden is going to go with some of those things, and so I think we're watching cautiously optimistic that he will, as he addresses the pandemic and the need to address the safety side of the pandemic, that we are able to pay attention to the economic side of the pandemic. Just lastly, I was in DC a couple weeks ago for the organization, and I was saddened by the number of boarded up
Yes.
businesses back east. I know you're from back there, but I was saddened by that and looking that, as you walk around that area, there's no one there, and those businesses are seriously impacted. Utah, in some ways, is in a little bit of a bubble where we're protected by our great legislature and our governor and the business climate that we have created here for generations and generations. However, we need to continue to be aggressive in how we set the stage policy wise for Utah to continue to thrive. So that, that's the long answer. The short answer is I hope that we see a turn in the petroleum industry. I hope we see a turn in the supply chain that helps those folks, our machine shops and our CNC operators and our custom fabricators, those folks who have done a lot of work in the aerospace and in the oil and gas industries, and some of those two have taken a hit.
Yeah. Well, what we're seeing with some of these companies is to help them with diversification of their customer base, to teach them how to go out and find more customers. And we, as part of UIRA, we have our Connects Utah tool, which is very helpful. And then we've also launched these B2B, business to business, government contracting matchmakings to help companies get one-on-one exposure. And Northrop Grumman has been a tremendous supporter. We had our first one on October 29th, and now they're rolling out just about weekly coming into the next quarter. So I think that's one way our both organizations can help these companies that are in the deep freeze to find some new opportunities and then pivot. I mean, some of our companies have been able to pivot and be able to take advantage of PPEs and some other new technologies.
Talk just briefly, Tulinda, about Connects and how that tool can be effective to some of these companies that are looking for sectors and areas that maybe they haven't done a lot of work in previously.
Well, Connects is a online tool that was developed in Utah, and then UAMMI rolled it out in 2019. And we ran it all 2020, getting all the kinks out for our 150 advanced materials and advanced manufacturing companies. And again, thanks to the CARES funding, we're able to, with UARA, expand that platform to 8,500 manufacturers in the state. So now every single manufacturer in the state of Utah is in this platform. And we are phoning and making sure and validating all the information. So it gives the larger companies ways to find suppliers, and it gives suppliers ways to see where there might be gaps in the market that they could fill.
Yeah. And I think, I've got a little history with that, but the
Oh, it
assumption,
started here.
right?
Yeah, it started with UMA. I'm sorry.
No, you're
Yeah.
great. But the assumption, I think, just to point that out, was that the assumption is that inside of the supply chain in Utah, that generally speaking, everybody kind of knows everyone else. And the one thing that we found over those years is that's not necessarily true.
Right.
Our companies are doing work with companies that they've been working with for years and sometimes generations, based on performance or price or whatever that is. And in many cases, a lot of those companies have said, well, God, I'd really like to find somebody else that could do work for me who might be closer to home, logistic challenges, price challenges, federal requirements for outreach, those types of things, DBE, WBE requirements, those types of things. But also for our smaller companies or supply chain are saying, we've done work in the aerospace side, but we haven't done it work in the aerospace side in Utah. Who could we do work with here locally? All in kind of a twofold. One is business development for these companies, but secondly, and maybe just as important, is economic development in the state of Utah and keeping those jobs here, keeping those tax dollars here, and keeping all those things. So in a lot of ways, we're bullish on the fact that, yeah, we're unabashedly promoting, bring those jobs back to Utah, do them with
Absolutely.
local companies here. And that's what
Absolutely.
Connects does a fabulous
It
job of.
does a good job. It connects into the National Association of Manufacturers National Marketplace.
Yes.
So it's a
Yep.
great tool.
Awesome.
So this next slide really looks at some of the key industries that are facing these challenges. And Todd, you and I have talked about this before. I mean, certainly our aerospace and commercial aviation are top of the line of having some significant problems as they face the Boeing and Airbus cutbacks in there. So we see them down on a downward trajectory right now, and it looks like from Boeing's forecast, it's going to take years to.
Yeah, and again, just to put that in perspective, I know that Boeing has somewhere in the neighborhood of 18,000 suppliers, and so the trickle down from an industry that's hit in that type of an area is significant, and the same is true with other subsectors, which we'll talk about.
Oh, I'm sorry. The first one is petroleum. I can't read it this far away. So sorry. You put your glasses on.
Okay. I can read it, but they keep fogging up, right? It's like,
I know
okay, so I can't see that. So yeah.
I'm sorry. It's petroleum.
Yeah, petroleum and coal products. And,
Yeah.
and again, certainly as, I had this conversation with a colleague the other day about coal products. And, we're certainly in a transitionary mode and have been for some time on coal-fired power.
Mhm.
And an example of that would be IPA here in Utah that is the power generator for Los Angeles Water and Power. And so 900 kilowatt hours of coal-fired power in Delta that goes to Southern California. And in 2024, I believe it is, they'll be converting to natural gas.
Wow.
And so
wow.
you're going to have somewhere in the neighborhood of, I believe it's somewhere around 6 to 7 short tons of coal that we need to find a home for.
Well, that's what we're doing.
So coal to carbon.
Coal to
there's my
fiber.
softball toss to you.
Absolutely. This is perfect. We're a good team. So yeah, so one of the big initiatives with UAMMI and working with the University of Utah is to find non-fuel burning uses for coal. Finally, it's up. We can see it now. Thank you. So as my mantra has started to become, coal is too valuable to burn, and looking at the ways that we can use coal for other products, such as making carbon fiber. And also we have a proposal that's going in the end of this week on using coal for construction. We got a nice little company here in Utah called Combustive Resources that's able to make nice little bricks. And so that's the key thing, is that we're going to have to find other uses for the coal. And Utah is investing big time in finding those. And it's all about rural Utah too.
Yeah, we
the
have
Uinta
to.
Basin is rural Utah.
We certainly have to, because again, as we start to transition in some of that, our rural communities are hugely impacted by coal power and coal-fired power production, and we need to be aggressive in how we look at how we look at addressing that. So
the other ones that we see, automotive was going down, but now it is running up. It's turned around some, and then some of these others. Well, we're getting tight on time because you and I can chat all day. I don't know what happened to the presentation.
So we've lost
the presentation.
We've got something else jumped up on the screen there. You grab your mouse there, and you want me to do that?
Yeah, thank you.
That. I'll run.
Okay, you run the slides.
Side for you.
Oh, that's all I had to do. Okay, so just hit to the next.
And I'm going to get that one right there. Maybe. I don't know. I pushed a button, and now I lost the screen, guys. Who knows what I did there?
Well, the thing that we're lucky about here in Utah is such a strong economic base
Yeah.
for our manufacturers to, as you said, we have low unemployment relative to the rest of the nation. Our unemployment has definitely returned and is able to support the growth that we see going out. The forecast that we had that we did from whether it was released in November, we had three scenarios, basically high, low, and expected. And unfortunately, we did not prepare. We didn't understand that we would have this massive third wave
Yeah.
that's coming in.
Yeah.
That's really become a very difficult uh, phenomenon for our economy and for our society to adjust to. So, unfortunately, in all the forecasts that we did, I think the low scenario is the one that's
Mhm.
playing out here as opposed to the
Yeah.
expected.
There was, I was just going to also comment, Tulinda, I just saw a study that, or a survey that came out of our National Association of Manufacturers talked about confidence,
Uh-huh.
manufacturers' confidence in where they're heading. And you know, as you would expect, the confidence in April, May was very low. And then the number has slightly increased as we've gone through. And at the end of the year, I think the number that I saw, and don't quote me on it because I just read it this morning, but was I thought it said 64% of our manufacturers have an optimistic outlook of where their individual companies are going over the next year, which is, you know, close to double where it was when we first did that initial survey in beginning of April,
That's
where
good.
a lot of unknowns. And so, you know, a lot of that is, you know, from an economic standpoint, you know this, consumer confidence is really important in driving the economy, but also the confidence of our companies, our manufacturers across the country and across the state to look at investing capital into their
Hmm.
operations and look at expanding their operations. And all of that is part of that economic cycle. You're the doctor of economics. And so you've forgotten more about that than I even know, but it is critical as we look at how do we help that economy growing. And Utah,
Exactly.
you know, we saw this in '09, and we were one of the last states to kind of go into that recession, and we're one of the
Hmm.
first states to come out of it. And I think that speaks highly of our business principles here in Utah, of how we govern, of our limited governmental interference in business, all of those principles that Utah continually touts for how we should run our state. And you don't have to look very far to see some of the other states out there and where they struggle in some of those areas. But that's going to be interesting to
I
watch
think you're right.
is confidence of our manufacturers.
You know what? If you would just take the presentation down, I don't know what the people are seeing out there. Just turn it
Oh,
off
let me give this to.
and we'll just talk because we can't seem to get the
Yeah,
presentation to work with us.
we're having
Not working.
a computer
Yeah,
issue. One of
exactly.
our Macs has decided to become possessed, as it were,
Maybe it
and
has COVID.
it,
Who
it
knows?
very well may be. But
Maybe it has COVID.
Annette, can you help us? Have we got questions on the chat there? Do we know if we're able to pull them up? And even if you need to pull this other laptop off, I want to make sure that we,
Well,
like I said, we've got a computer that is just it is possessed right now and acting like a screensaver. So,
well, one of the
um,
other things that's happened with this recession, the COVID recession, that first of all was really sudden, and usually you have a nice slow.
yeah,
But it also is what we're calling a pink collar, and I see you're wearing your pink today. Pink collar recession, where it's really
yeah.
hitting women more than others in the workforce, mainly because the women take care of the home and are the caregivers, and so they've been dropping.
Online school
Oh,
has caused a challenge with
that's
that, and
right.
online education, in particular in our communities,
Hmm.
right? Yeah,
So, but that gives us a big pool of talent that we can tap into if we can
yeah.
transition, which is what I think we're all doing, is transitioning to more online ways of doing business. I mean, it's hard to run a production plant online, right?
It
At some
is.
point, you have to be there and make the product.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we've talked to when you talk about the pandemic is, you know, unlike a software company or something like that, a lot of our companies have certainly gone virtual with the jobs that they're able to do that. But if you're on the front line and you're production workers, you know, number one, you can't leave the line because the production shuts down. Number two, sometimes it's extremely difficult to be outside of 6 feet. And
Yes.
so we've done a lot with CARES Act. You talk about CARES Act funding. We've gone into companies to do industrial hygienist reviews and epidemiologist reviews to look at how our companies are dealing with things, from everything from interaction of 6 feet to plexiglass to airflow within a facility,
Yes.
all of those things to try and help them continue to be productive. And so, I think the one thing that we can certainly agree on, that all of our industry, all of our folks in our UIRA need to continue to work on, which we've been doing for the last 10 months, is how to help our companies be productive during uncertain times,
Mm-hmm.
and how to pivot when they can, adjust as they must, and kind of deal with those types of challenges. And one of the things we talked about on this group call I was on earlier was, that we may do a whole section on, is the mental health fatigue impacts of the pandemic on our workforce, and how are our employees dealing with emotional fatigue, and what they're dealing with in the changing environments and what they're going through. And I've had that conversation with multiple manufacturers of ours, that maintaining their culture and their team building and all those things that our companies work so hard to do in their environment, their manufacturing communities, is difficult, because you've got half your workforce there, half your workforce at home, workforce that's working changing hours, and the environment in which they work in is changing weekly from layouts and other types of things like that. And so, the challenges are great, but I am super proud of our manufacturing community and what they've accomplished, where they've taken us over the last 9-10 months, and how they've risen beyond, to make the products that are helping our public right now, not just in the medical arena, but making household products, and making the things that are allowing folks to get outside and get away from the pandemic a little bit. All of those things have played a role.
It was interesting before Christmas, there was a discussion as to if additional bailout money, additional
PPP, yeah,
PPP Cares funding came, what would manufacturers want? And it was uniform in the ones that I've talked with. They're not looking for a bailout, but now they're looking for, they want to protect their employees. So they
yeah.
happen to have PPP, and
Or
they,
economic relief tax credits, the RTOC, as well.
exactly,
Yeah,
that's what they're looking for,
yeah.
not a bailout, because most of them have been able to make
Mhm.
the adjustments
And
to,
goes back to the point we talked about, which is workforce is so critical, that there is such a fear of companies losing that workforce and having to go back and re-recruit them, that they want to do everything they can to maintain that workforce, right?
yes,
Because if you
yes,
move them to someone else, then you got to try and bring them back. So,
exactly.
we got a question here, or a statement here from Mark Hadley. Says, thank you for the webinar. After hearing Governor Cox talk about technical education and his support of
Mm.
it, how can we get the Utah Manufacturers Association and UAMMI more involved with Utah colleges to encourage students to take a look at going to a tech college and get a great paying job? How can we join together to market in our high schools, junior highs, and more young women? And that's a good question. It's something we've been working on for years, as to how to do a better job of getting inside of our local schools. Um, what age do we start at? What is the message that we need to send? And we've actually had some plans this year to work much more cohesively with our tech colleges in putting together some talent acquisition, talent retention types of workforce plans. And it's something that, um, it's multifaceted, because you've got marketing to parents, you got marketing to kids, and we've got a little bit of the image to overcome, which is still prevalent, even though it shouldn't be, that our tech colleges and our CTE types of careers are somehow lesser than 4-year degrees, and we've
Well,
got to try and help figure out how to balance that.
yeah, and we were very fortunate in Utah to receive the designation by the Department of Defense as a defense manufacturing support community. So under the Utah Defense Manufacturing Community, UDMC, we have a whole range of programs that are funded by this new grant to help as young as kindergarten. We're working with My Tech High, which is a homeschool program to develop curriculum, working with America Makes to put in manufacturing concepts. They're just exposures so that they come away by the time they're in eighth grade and say, hey, the interesting, cool stuff is over in manufacturing.
Yeah.
Because I know you probably saw the study last year that came out with the Granite School District that by the time they get to high school, 73% of the kids were not interested
Yeah.
in manufacturing. So we're hoping that with these programs, we'll be able to turn that around. The first part of this grant is unfortunately with COVID-19 and the restructuring of the Utah budget over the summer, a number of these programs had to be cut out. So we were able to step in with the funding under UDMC and put the funding back into place to keep them going. Some women and girls programs, the STEM Action Center programs, the UAP, Utah Aerospace
Mhm. I mentioned
Pathways
the pathways, the
Program.
medical device pathway, the truck, there's a
Exactly.
truck maintenance one. Yeah. So
So
we've made progress on a lot of those
we
things.
really have it.
The challenge too, though, is it didn't want to interrupt you,
That's
Tulinda,
okay.
but is as you have those pathways typically start in high school. And to your
Yes.
point, what we tend to get is a pipeline that's about 4 inches around that kind of has a trickle of water coming out of it. We got to figure out how at that younger age to encourage those kids to, if you like to build things, every kid loves Legos. How do you
Mhm.
take Legos into helping kids understand that that's manufacturing,
Well,
right?
3D printing. Who
Yeah,
can't get excited about
yeah.
3D printing?
Yeah,
Uh,
my nephew just got a 3D printer, and he's making a Mandalorian mask, and he's just
oh my
absolutely. I sent
goodness.
him this link, and I'm like, you got to go look at this thing. This guy makes this Mandalorian mask, and he's all super excited about that. And so he and I've now bonded and been able to have these conversations about manufacturing, right? Because I think part of this again goes back to that earlier statement of today. So many people don't see that we still make things,
Yeah.
that everything around them is made and that is manufactured. It's either grown, mined, or manufactured. And so that message is something that for years, I've struggled a little bit. We've got multiple entities across the state that are kind of running in the same general direction of workforce development. But I think we still as a broad group haven't quite figured out how to get our arms around a problem that is facing our nation entirely, but in Utah is perhaps a little bit exacerbated, which is for every high tech degree that we have in, say, advanced materials, we need 7 technically trained individuals to work in that same industry. And,
Exactly.
and, and so those are the jobs that are paying, as you saw, $72,000 on average. Clean room environments, a young man that I met years ago that was working at Northrop Grumman, but Orbital ATK is working on the A320 project. And he was just finishing his degree, which Orbital ATK had paid for. And he worked in this amazing clean room environment. And when the gentleman who was on our board told me the wage that he was making, I just kind of went, man, I messed up. I should have
Yeah.
I should have gone into that area. But those are the types of jobs that we've got to do a better job. It's some things we're trying to do with this virtual environment, our tours,
And
right? Our
this
tours. We
really
just did,
helped.
yeah, we just
Oh,
did
yesterday,
Terraflex.
Wednesday, that was a
Yeah.
fabulous
And
tour.
Blendtech and others, and getting into those companies to demonstrate, hey, this is what the inside of a manufacturing facility looks like. It's not your grandfather's industry. It's not dirty, dark, dead end, and dangerous. It's the antithesis of all those things.
Mhm.
And if we can help kids in younger generations understand that, then you capture a young man or a young woman who loves to build things, is a creative entrepreneur type of thing, and say, the world is your oyster. Manufacturing is where it's at.
It sure
And how do
is.
we bring you in to do that? So,
So we've covered now some economic trends. Do we have another
yeah, I've
question?
got one more question. I know that there was a question about sending out the PowerPoint, and we
Slides?
had some
Yeah,
issues.
we
We'll
can do that.
certainly do that.
We can
We'll
do
we'll
that.
send that out immediately to all of our folks so you can get a chance to look at it. I got one here. Hello from Massachusetts. Hello,
Oh,
Massachusetts. Wow. Boston, absolutely fabulous food town, fabulous sports town. One of my favorite places. Don't tell New York. I love Boston more than New York by far. Everything you're saying could be said here as well, especially about getting our young people excited about careers in manufacturing. Question: what are your thoughts on how the Defense Production Act will play out, and how should our manufacturers be getting ready?
that's an excellent question. I mean, it was called into play early when we were making respirators
Yeah.
and PPE. We need now is the supplies, the syringes, and the packets that go to be able to do the injections. So any manufacturer that could produce the syringes and the I guess it's gauze and a whole the kit for the vaccine, that is a very essential, and that's I think where we're going to see the defense manufacturing defense in wow, I'm
Defense
stumbling
Production Act. Yeah.
Production Act
Yeah.
coming in,
Yeah.
and that's what at this point we need less respirators because it seems like we do have them covered, and we do need more PPEs. My husband's in healthcare, and the gowns.
Mm-hmm.
He used to pay 35 cents for a gown. He's now paying $8.50 for a gown per gown that they wear and throw
Is
away.
that a bedazzled gown?
Yeah,
It's been, yeah,
no,
yeah,
no. So we do still need some PPE.
we do.
We definitely do. But I think what the president is talking about is getting the supporting materials for the vaccines
Yeah.
produced.
And certainly one of the things we found through the pandemic that I think, I'm hopeful that we will be able to address these things is supply chain.
Yeah.
And in some ways, our reliance on certain aspects of the supply chain. We responded to the PPE challenges much in this country by companies pivoting
Yes.
as we produced, 2.1 million masks in the state. You and I are both wearing masks that were made by Utah companies. And those companies transitioned and pivoted from traditional cut and sew operations, or in some cases like an auto leave,
Well, yeah,
who
I
made
was just,
gowns and made masks and
and
made,
I love
you
the
know,
DPS skis.
yeah,
They
yeah,
they
face
pivoted.
masks, and Alex and his crew
Yeah.
doing that. And so it's certainly across the board. Again, we rose to the challenge, but it does identify a gap in the supply chain that if and when there is something that becomes more global, the need to address those types of things. It's one of the things I've visited a little bit with our economic development professionals in the state, and I want to have that conversation more. Is as we are strategically looking at the companies that we recruit to Utah, let's make sure that we are doing those in a supply chain gap system,
Mhm.
rather than just kind of taking the companies that come through the door. How do we be a little bit more proactive about finding those companies that fill a need in Utah? A great example of that would be somebody like a Janicki, who came in as a need for orbital ATK and others to fill some type of a gap in a supply chain. And I think that's how we make our overall our clusters in manufacturing and our focus stronger by doing that.
Well, that kind of brings me to the other topic. I mean, we covered workforce, we've covered supply chain, and we've covered the economics of it. We've looked at some of the challenges facing reshoring. That's another initiative under the Utah Defense Manufacturing Community Programs is to look at ways that we can reshore some of these products that are made off outside of the United States and bring them back in. We were fortunate with one of our partner organizations, Impact Utah, where they did a nice analysis for us of looking at all of the products that are imported to the United States and then what is imported to Utah, and then map them to what our manufacturers are producing so that we can see where there are opportunities
are.
to go out there. And we have our EDC, Economic Development Corporation of Utah, who has nice packages put together. But I was really pleased to hear with the governor's speech last night and the presentation of the ideas of having stimulus incentive packages for new companies, startups. I mean, Utah has been really good at attracting some of the legacy companies here, but when you have a startup, they need a lot more help.
Yeah.
And it's hard to give them money because you don't know if they're going to make it or not. But this idea of relaxing regulations, I think, is a fabulous idea. And I think that'll help us with this reshoring effort too.
Yeah, I like that as well. And if I were king for the day, I would add one more component to that is that, EDCU and GoEd, do a great job of economic development. And we need a three-prong approach. We need one for recruiting companies from out of state who want to come fill a need in a supply chain gap. Number two is an incentive program for companies that are currently here and are growing, so that we have that opportunity for tax credits and tax incentives, that type of thing. And then we need something for those types of startup companies to continue to incentivize entrepreneurship and that type of, that's what Utah's all about, right? Is those types of things. And so, I would love to see us have a three-prong approach to how we do that, so that we continue to get external growth, organic growth from our existing manufacturers that have been here for a long time, and then that startup growth from those entrepreneurs as well, which again, three-legged stool, if you will, to use a tax term,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yes,
address that. So
yeah.
so yeah, any other questions, or we want to be respectful of everybody's time. It looks like Annette's got one more question that's going to come in here, and let's see here, just waiting for the technology. There we go. So the question is, would you share your thoughts around supporting and prioritizing advanced high-value manufacturing versus low-value manufacturing in the U.S.?
Hmm.
Want to take a stab at that, or you
That's
want me
a
to?
that's a challenging question. Well, particularly it's a hard one for me to answer since I represent advanced materials and advanced
Sure,
manufacturing,
sure.
who are definitely on the high value end. So I'm going to pitch that back to
Sure.
you.
I'll take a stab at it. I would say that, you know, um, Utah has a pretty good mix of both
Yes, we
of
do.
those. And what I would say, and just in a broad perspective, is that we need both. And we need to make sure, for instance, I'll take an example. I mean, we have the largest open pit copper mine in the world here in Utah, which affords a lot of opportunities for our higher tech manufacturing companies by having access to those types of resources. And the other thing I would say is that it is a challenge. We are traditionally, manufacturing is seen as high tech, high value, low tech, low value. When I don't know that that's necessarily, in my opinion, true. Manufacturing in its essence is the adding a value to a product. A raw material, which then we add value to, which then continues to grow. It's the very definition of new wealth, right? Because all new wealth is said that all new wealth comes from the ground. Everything else is just value added. In other words, after we manufacture a product and we sell it, that's wealth, but it's not new wealth. I think we've got a pretty good mixture in Utah. I think we're going to continue to have to look at advances in technology, how that impacts the value of those jobs. I could give you example after example of say a welding job, that over the years, those have been very, very good paying jobs, which in some cases now they're transitioning to automated types of welding equipment, which has made us in some cases more precise, more effective, raised the skill level on the
Mhm.
on the worker, which in turn raises the wage, and increases productivity and other things. So, I've probably danced around that question a little bit, but I think it is. It can be complicated. I'm very proud of Utah's diverse manufacturing community, because the phrase soup to nuts, but we literally have soup to nuts that we
Yeah.
make in this
Well,
in this state,
that's
and
right. That
and it is.
study, that one slide that did come up certainly shows that.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, another program that UAMMI manages is on behalf of the Small Business Administration is called our Regional Innovation Cluster Program. Utah was one of 7 communities selected
yeah,
by the SBA
yep.
to create this cluster of advanced materials and advanced manufacturing in 2018. 2019 was the first year that we implemented the program. And that's how we've identified the roughly 200 companies that are in Utah. And for that, on behalf of the Small Business Administration, we are able to provide them some technical consulting and help them, give them a hand to help them up. And we're just finishing graduations next week, a 12-week program that's we call RAMP, which is a intensive mentoring program for our small businesses, where they get to sit down with our UIRA partner companies, our professors, our investors, learn how to do a pitch and come through that process and come out on the other end much stronger in their business plan, in their production plan, and their whole strategic plan going forward. So being able to work on a one-on-one basis with some of these smaller businesses in the high tech end, most of them we're finding are actually in the sporting outdoors and sporting area that have been able to take advantage of this program. And again, the silver lining of COVID is that that program traditionally has been an in-person program. So it was only Northern Utah. But this year, for the first time, we were a virtual program and we covered the entire state.
Yeah.
We were able to geographically bring in people, companies to be able to take advantage by using virtual learning. So that's pretty exciting to
Yeah.
help pull up our smaller companies.
Again, I think, maybe just wrap up for us is, Utah's got a lot, we have a lot going for us. And I think that's important to remember. Our legislative session started this Tuesday, and as I visit with my colleagues around the country, they're in mourning that they're going into their legislative sessions, and we have been blessed in the state of Utah with for the very most part a legislature and governor and others who are very pro-business, who want to see our companies succeed. They understand their value. They understand their impact on the state of Utah, and we as an organization obviously are very heavily involved in that process in governmental affairs and public policy. And it's a time that we need to focus on what is best for the state of Utah. And then maybe just lastly, I'd take a stab at we've seen a transition in the country, transition of power, and we have a new president, new administration. And there will be some challenges with that administration, just like there was challenges with our previous administration. We as an organization are committed to trying to continue to work on what is the best, what are the best opportunities for manufacturers? How do we
Absolutely.
connect and strengthen those manufacturers? How do we make them stronger? How do we help them in their ability to hire more individuals and pay those high wages and contribute to income tax in the state, which goes to our education funding and our property taxes and all those things that manufacturers do. And so I would just encourage the folks that are on the webinar to again, we need to look forward with a positive outlook.
Yeah, with
and we
hope.
need to stay focused on what is good for us as our companies and what's good for us as individuals. And as my son likes to say, if we can be anything today, be kind.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But we have such a bright future
Yeah.
with once we do get this pandemic under control.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea of our unemployment being so low, it looks like
It's kind of crazy.
yes, and it's also when you look back at the Spanish flu of 1918 that then was followed by the Roaring Twenties, right? You have to think that we may well be on that same curve. And what innovation will our companies come up with? After 2008,
Yeah.
the innovation that came after that recession was Uber, Airbnb, Slack, all of these service companies. So maybe I'd like to leave everyone with the hope that when we come out of this recession, we're going to see innovation on the
Innovation.
manufacturing side.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. So, Linda, thank you so much for
Well,
taking the
thank
time to
you. I
be here.
appreciate it.
This, we had a few technical difficulties, but hopefully we were able to
That's life
answer
these days.
answer the questions for our folks on the call. And we have one more question. Okay, sounds like we got one more question. We may get Annette on the mic here.
So just one last question. This is actually from San Antonio, Texas. He taught STEM courses in middle school and had several students go into manufacturing careers. They were successful by focusing on doing something cool versus the salary. The students didn't really plug into what they would make. They just wanted to know something cool, and we knew manufacturing was cool. So his final question is, would you share your thoughts on what it means for manufacturers in the U.S. when China has indicated that it is pivoting away from being the world's factory?
Well,
Yay.
I would say yes. Yeah, I was going to say that, we talked a little bit about reshoring there, and,
That's the
and
whole
certainly
reshoring
the
initiative.
opportunities to, in a lot of ways, if China decides to pivot that way, either from a governmental standpoint or because of their middle class, which has grown, and as their middle class grows, the cost of labor in China has gone up, which has in some ways leveled the playing field. They're still dominant in the textile industry typically, but there are a lot of companies that are looking at one of two things: bringing those jobs either back into the United States or bringing them back to Canada and Mexico through the new USMCA agreement,
Oh, that's
and
another
then
good
slowly
one.
transitioning them back up into the US. We have a significant number of companies who are working in Tijuana and Tecate, Mexico, with 1 day's drive to here, and factories, et cetera. So I am very I'm very anxious to see what happens through the pandemic. There has been a significant resurgence of Made in America,
There has been.
and I'm excited to see what happens with it.
And people not traveling and focusing inward in the initiatives.
Buy local, the In
Exactly.
Utah program through Go Ed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But one thing we didn't really cover so much is the research. And that's where the United States has always led out, as in the innovation and the research.
R&D.
Our
Yep.
universities, our academic institutions are way out in looking at, like this subject of coal to carbon fiber, taking coal and spinning it to carbon fiber. That's where I see us capturing the jobs back here and capturing the products back here, because we'll have a better technology
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
implement.
Yeah. Well, cheers to the
Yeah.
Utah Made, and
I love
let's make
this.
more products in Utah. Let's make more products here in the U.S. and continue to grow our piece of the pie. I think there is an interest in doing that. One of the things we'll be working on in the next 6 months is how to make the public here much more aware of how to buy Utah products. What is made here? How do I get my hands on them? And
Mhm.
and again, a lot of times people want to buy local, they just don't know how to do that. And so we're going to work on a big initiative on that as well. But again, thanks for all the wonderful questions. San Antonio, Boston, or Massachusetts, good night.
Yeah.
It's we've made you a rock star, Tulinda.
Yeah, well,
You
thank
already
you.
were, but now you're a radio and podcast
Well, yeah, there we
rock star.
go.
So thanks
Well,
for being with us here
well,
today. And
Well, I promise we'll do this again in
Let's do it.
March
Yeah.
when we release the 2.0
your
of
study.
the study.
Yep.
And hopefully we get the slides to work that
We'll
time.
have it figured out. We're still
Then
in
we'll put
the
the numbers to it.
I'm going to trash that computer as soon as we're done here. I'm going to go run it over with a car or something, and we'll make that change. But thanks for being here. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks to everybody that participated. We'll send out the slide presentation. Make sure
Sounds
everybody gets
good.
that. You guys are a fabulous partner of ours, and we really enjoy the partnership and the ability to work together on strengthening manufacturers in the state of Utah. So thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Yep,
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.